I'd like to call the meeting of the City of Sebastian Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Today's date is December 7th. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roth?
Here.
Mr. Simmons?
Here.
Ms. Kottenberg?
Here.
Mr. Carter?
Present.
Mr. Kizelbosch?
Here.
Mr. Hugan?
Here.
And Mr. Alvarez?
Thank you. Under announcements tonight, Mr. Reyes is excused and Mr. Simmons will be voting in his place. Mr. McManus' term has expired and he is retired. He has retired his seat from the commission. Mr. Hugan has formally been appointed to the city, by the City Council as a regular member.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you for your service. Any other announcements or agenda modifications? No. Okay. You've all had the opportunity to read the minutes from our meeting of September 21st. Are there any additions or corrections? Okay, hearing none.
I didn't see any. If appropriate, I'll make a motion for their approval as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And tonight we have a public hearing to review and make recommendations to the City Council regarding Ordinance 01801 relating to medical marijuana treatment centers and dispensaries, amending the Land Development Code, Article 22, Language and Definitions, and Article 5, Zoning District Regulations. Okay. You have all received copies of the transmittal form for this, and we are going to be holding a public hearing on this review. So could we have some staff input?
And Ms. Chairman, if you could, and I apologize, I didn't leave the sheet there by your chair, but if we could follow the procedure that's listed under that title there, and the attorney will open up by reading the ordinance title.
I'm sorry, which?
Under the quasi-judicial and public hearings, there's procedures for a public hearing, if we can follow that, and open up with the disclosing any ex parte communication.
I'm sorry. Okay, we'll formally open the hearing, and the attorney can read the ordinance.
This is ordinance, is everyone hearing me? Okay, ordinance 01801, an ordinance of the City of Sebastian in Univers County, Florida, relating to medical marijuana treatment centers, rescinding ordinance 01701, amending the Land Development Code, Article 22, Language and Definitions, amending Article 5, Zoning District Regulations, providing for severability, conflict, codification, and an effective date.
Thank you. Has any member of the commission had any ex parte communication with any party?
No.
Hearing none. Now could we have a staff presentation?
I'm not sure if we have to be sworn in for the public hearing.
Well, it's not actually a quasi-judicial hearing. I can swear folks in, though, if they want to provide factual testimony either way, but it's not quasi-judicial. It's a public hearing.
Correct.
Thank you, Chairman. I can offer some staff input on this at this time. This is, in April of 2017, we had, earlier in the year actually, we had some workshops and discussions on the direction that the city wanted to go regarding the recently adopted medical marijuana referendum that was approved in November from the state of Florida voters. We had decided that we were good with them being allowed in the city of Sebastian. At the time, we were using the term medical marijuana treatment centers. And after public hearings that went through both through the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, you had approved ordinance 01701. What we had done with that ordinance, as we had created definitions, we had discussed the zoning districts that we were okay with having those medical marijuana treatment centers in, and we had also created some conditional use criteria. There was 4 criteria that the Commission and Council had approved. Shortly after, in June, Senate Bill 8A was approved by the state and signed into law in July by the governor. In essence, what that bill did and some of the requirements in that bill, it created our ordinance 1701. We had some items in there that were non-compliant with the state law. State law basically, in a summary, limited control of what the local governments and municipalities could do for the medical marijuana treatment centers, and that is listed in and one of the whereases in the 01801 ordinance, which in summary basically said you can basically, through an ordinance or something formal, say we do not want the medical marijuana treatment centers in our municipality, or we're okay with them being in there, but we have to treat them no more restrictive than we do pharmacies. And after that was brought to City Council in the summer, they said we'd still like to keep them in within the city, allow them, and so proceed to adopt this new ordinance, go through the procedure to update our code, to bring it into compliance with state law. And that's what you have before you at 1801. What we did basically is, and you'll see that's in blue. What we did was we added a section 1, which we have to formally rescind the previous ordinance that we adopted, 1701. We added some definitions, and we kind of revised the definitions that were in 1701 that are now in 1801 for marijuana and marijuana treatment centers, and we made them into compliant that's in the state bill. So that is pretty much the exact same definition in that bill, so we wouldn't be any different from that. We also, as Lisa and I were going through our code, we don't have a specific zoning designation or land use for pharmacies. We include that in commercial retail. Some municipalities and zoning codes may have a separate definition for pharmacies. Ours was just included in commercial retail. So we realized that we had no land use definition for commercial retail. And so we kind of put together one that we felt would work for the city of Sebastian. And as you can see on page 3, on that ordinance, we clearly included pharmacies in there, so there would be no confusion if there was a medical marijuana treatment center that wanted to come in. The state bill used the term dispensaries, is how they were defining the units, the storefronts that would be actually distributing where patients would come to pick up their prescriptions. So we wanted to use their definition, land use, and add that into our code instead of marijuana treatment centers. The state bill defines a treatment center as also the operation that could cultivate, that could grow, that can dispense, delivery. That was their definition of treatment centers. I think that's, and the state bill also says that we cannot eliminate and not have them in our town. That's totally up to the state to determine where those can be located, the cultivation and grow houses and things like that. The city had the choice to allow the dispensaries. So we did define that term, that land use, and that's what's used in our code now. Instead of medical marijuana treatment centers, we're calling them medical marijuana dispensaries. And then as you can see, we added them back into the commercial districts that we wanted them. The previous discussion and the ordinance that was approved, we had not had them in the commercial limited. During the discussion, you had decided that would not be a good spot for them. However, based on the new state bill, we cannot take them out of there because we allowed pharmacies in the commercial limited zoning district. So we did have to put in the commercial limited back into the ordinance. What also was in your packet was the ordinance, the previous one that was approved, that we're rescinding, but just so we pointed out what was being changed in that. So you have a copy of that. And we also included a monthly newsletter that we get from the Office of Medical Marijuana Use from the Department of Health, and we thought that had some appropriate information in there to help you make your decision on this new ordinance. Staff does recommend approval of this ordinance, but it is under your discussion, and we recommend that you make a recommendation to City Council to adopt ordinance 1801.
Okay. We'll open the questioning for the commission. Does anybody have any?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just, do we need to rescind the 1701, or do we need to actually rescind that?
In the new ordinance, 1801, it is on page 2. There's actually a new section that
Okay.
specifically rescinds that past
All right,
ordinance.
so if we get to a vote or at some point on this, it automatically takes care of itself.
Yes.
But I
It
do have a
automatically
question on the
rescinds it, yeah.
definition. Medical services, is that where pharmacies are included?
No, they would be considered retail.
No, but I meant where you got the sections like 54, 2, 5, 3, 1, you've got everything listed, uses permitted, and you've got medical services. I'm assuming that includes pharmacies. And
No,
right below it, you got medical marijuana dispensaries. Is pharmacies included in medical services is the question.
No, if you look also on page 3, the top of that page, we are adding pharmacies into the commercial retail definition. See on the top where it says commercial
Right here,
activities,
okay.
land use. In the code, there's a definition for medical services, and that definition is more your doctor's office providing those type of services.
Even though the word is not there, it's implied by the change you've added up under point C, commercial retail.
Correct,
So there's nothing in that list that's going to say pharmacy.
correct.
That was a hang-up I had. I couldn't find any rationale for it. Okay.
Just for clarification, what we're proposing here, or what we're looking at, doesn't change what our original ordinance or recommendation was. It's just making it conform to the new state laws. Is that correct, Dory?
Correct, but it does change. We had, you had adopted them before with 4 conditions. They couldn't be located 500 feet from another medical marijuana treatment center.
Right.
You also had said that it could only have the sales of medical marijuana and related products. It had to be, consumption of the medical marijuana was prohibited on the premises, and you also had adopted a time, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Those conditions do go out the window. However, if you look on that first page, what the state bill is, they are requiring a distance from schools. And reading through the state bill, they actually have restrictions on signage, hours, kind of the same thing. It was similar. We did a very good job on guessing what that state bill was going to be, but similar to what ours was, but it's not quite our same. They are going to be the enforcement agency for that. Certainly, if we see a sign or something like that, we would have to report it to the
But we
Department
still
of
have
Health.
to conform to the state law, though, right? Regardless of what our qualifications were.
Yes, after the
Okay.
city attorney has reviewed this proposed ordinance, she feels that it would match the state bill, be in compliance.
Right, state law has largely preempted a lot of these restrictions that formerly we were putting into our land development code. So we're limited in what we as a municipality can do at this point because the state law has preempted much of the regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any size restriction? Let's say they have more than 5,000 square feet, and they put a dispensary and treatment center together.
Based on the state required, I didn't see anything, I didn't see any size restrictions. But now, if we still have some local control, is not necessarily the use and the location, but if they were to build a new building, we certainly can review for landscaping and parking, drainage. If they were, if it was interior permits, fire safety, that still is under our control for that use.
But in these zoning, we have a commercial retail restriction less than 5,000 square feet. So,
Yes, it does. We added it because the code says that we can't have it more restrictive than pharmacies. So we have a specific use medical marijuana dispensaries, but we treated it and put it in all the same places as commercial retail, because that includes our pharmacies. So it is not based on size, but we had to treat it no more restrictive than the commercial retail that has pharmacies in it.
If your question is this a little less restrictive than on pharmacies? I think the answer is yes, though, because commercial retail under, the C512 district is limited to less than 5,000 square feet. Am I answering your question, Mr. Kizzelbosch? Okay. Whereas we just put medical marijuana dispensaries with no size restriction in the draft ordinance. Does that address?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Hugo?
Question about limit on number of locations. There, point 1 in the Florida general law says we cannot limit the number of dispensing facilities. We have to rely on the state then to govern that?
Yes.
Is there any indication or interpretation or anything from the state on that?
As I
Do you know?
understand, and as I read the state bill, they have divided the state up into districts. And within those districts, based on the amount of patients that are going to be registered in their registry, that's how many they're going to allow. I don't think it says, though, that it would have to be, if there's 25 for the central district, I believe that we're in, could 25 be in Sebastian if they felt that that was the best place, business-wise? I have a feeling that will be spread all out, but that number will be changed, and it was going to be revised as every 100,000 enter into that registry, but then they would up the number. But that is regulated by the state, and if for whatever reason they did choose to put 5 in Sebastian, the state law does not allow us to say, no, we've got too many, or we don't think we need that many in town. It would be enforced by the state.
That does make me very nervous, taking that control away from us, trusting the state to govern that and make sure that we don't have a problem.
I would think
I'm
that
just
the
very
companies.
nervous about that.
I would think that the companies, though, that do have the licenses to run the dispensaries are going to look where the addresses are of those registries, of those the patients in that registry, and based on an address or a zip code, for their business purposes, are going to be looking at that.
It'll be like pharmacies. In other words, the commercial revenue will determine whether or not these centers will go in, and hopefully the state will watch it carefully.
I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that these dispensaries are for people who are extremely ill. This is not for recreational use. This is
Oh, no.
for people who are extremely ill. And I would guess the reason for placing them in districts in the state is so that very ill people aren't burdened with long travel in order to get their medication.
Because there's a very tough distribution, too, for these companies, as UPS and FedEx are federally registered companies that have to follow federal law, which marijuana is still illegal. So they can't necessarily use those normal distribution. It's either Uber drivers or a different way. Even the post office, they won't be able to deliver that medicine that way.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay, we'll open it up for any questions from the public or comments. No one? You can summarize if you want, though. I think, though, that you've pretty well touched on everything here. If no one else here has any other questions, then our job is to recommend to the City Council to either adopt or not adopt. So what is your pleasure?
Chairman Cottenberg, I did in the staff memo on page 2, though, there was some criteria that was supposed to be considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission as you make your decision from section 54-1 to -7B. And if you could, in your motion, note that you have considered consistency with our comp plan, things like that, just to cover that you have considered that criteria.
Please, whoever makes the motion, include that in your motion, should you deem to move in that direction.
I'll make a motion to recommend ordinance O-18-01 to the City Council as it is presented,
And including,
and including what you just mentioned.
If the motion could possibly read after consideration of the criteria in section
After
54, you make a
consideration of the
recommendation?
criteria.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
any further discussion on the motion? I think we'd better do a voice vote
Yes.
on this one.
Mr. Hugan?
Yes.
Mr. Kizilbosh?
Yes.
Chairman Cottenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Roth?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay, the public hearing is closed. The next item for us to deal with is unfinished business, which brings us to, if I'm correct, a discussion of short-term vacation rental. We were provided with a brief, and if you could enlighten us, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to see everyone again. If you recall, in September, this commission had requested that staff review the short-term rental situation, if you will, in the city of Sebastian. Prior to that, in July of 2016, the City Council had also made that type of request. Therefore, the staff provided this brief that's in front of you this evening, the short-term vacation rental brief, and presented it to the City Council in November. The City Council considered it and asked that we come back to the commission and get a recommendation from you as to how we would like to move forward. Excuse me. Similar to the medical marijuana situation, the city has preempted the regulation of short-term vacation rentals in a local government, such as the city of Sebastian. Short-term rentals are actually defined as, if you look under the summary, they're defined as property that is rented more than 3 times a year for less than 30 days at a time. Furthermore, the state has made it very clear that local governments cannot regulate the location or frequency of these vacation rentals. Hence, anywhere that a dwelling is allowed, so shall a short-term vacation rental be allowed. Now, prior to 2011, several local governments put ordinances in place stating that this, short-term vacation rentals will only be allowed in tourist districts or in commercially zoned districts, wherever there may be hotels, motels, such as that. If those local governments had those ordinances in place prior to 2011, they could stick by those ordinances as far as regulating their location and their frequency. However, the city of Sebastian are one of those local governments that did not have that ordinance in place. So the state has preempted any further regulation of the location and the frequency. However, in 2014, the state did go back and state that the local governments can regulate the life safety and building codes of short-term rentals. And again, life safety and building codes would include parking, proof of registration, of course, noise and vibration, fire safety, occupancy limits, those things, okay? So in our code, we do have noise regulations, we do have parking for commercial. We have similar codes that can be enforced by our code enforcement staff. However, that's about the extent of it at this point as far as short-term vacation rentals. Now, other local governments, such as Indian River County, have taken it quite a bit further, and they have a full application. They require you, or at least request, that you become registered, you become a registered business, that you prove that you are following the state guidelines as far as paying your rental tax or your bed tax, that you are complying with these life safety codes. So they've taken that extra step, and there's also a registration fee for following this registration or permit, if you will, for short-term vacation rentals. It is something to consider. I'm not sure how successful they are in monitoring this type of activity, because certainly, you know, it exists if you're on any of the Airbnb or VRBO, any of the online short-term vacation rental sites. There's no requirement in place that you go and get registered and pay the bed tax. And I think that is the crux of the argument, or the crux of the problem as identified by communities throughout the state, that, you know, suddenly that single-family home next door to you has 12 people staying there, and there's noise, and they're parking all over, and you don't know who's coming in and out every 3 days. So I believe that is the situation that the City Council has requested that staff and this commission and themselves all consider at this time.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll just briefly add, you know, the preemption authority by the statute, as it currently reads with the 2014 amendments, it indicates a local law, ordinance, or regulation may not prohibit vacation rentals or regulate the duration or frequency of rental of vacation rentals. Again, there's the grandfathering provision, and as Ms. Fraser mentioned, there's also an exception for life safety types of regulations. You know, in researching this, we looked a little bit as to what existing laws at the state level are in place, because again, this is a preemptive law that does regulate vacation rentals at the state level. Short-term vacation rentals, residential rentals of less than 6 months are transient rentals. They're subject to, anyone who operates such a facility is required by state law to register before the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. And of course, we would make the argument that you're operating a business, and so you would need to get a local business license as well. They're subject to both the state sales and use tax, the 6% state sales and use tax, as well as the tourist development tax. One of those is collected by the Department of Revenue, and one of those is collected by the clerk of the court of the county. So you kind of need to register before both of those items. And as Ms. Fraser said, the crux of what the county has done is they've basically had a local registration system, or set up a local registration system that, in my opinion, is basically a checklist of existing laws and ensuring compliance with those existing laws, and collecting a fee for the staff time, which may or may not cover the staff time to do that. The other day, I ran a search to see, you know, how many locations within a mailing address of Sebastian had registered with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. And if it's a dwelling place, again, you have to individually register each dwelling place. And it appears to be about, 20. So I suspect that's not all of them. But I just kind of wanted to give you that basic legal background. There are other laws that apply, but there's the state level DBPR registration. You have to register with the Department of Revenue so you can collect sales tax. You have to register with the county clerk of court so you can collect tourist and development tax. And then, of course, there's just the normal kind of building codes and things like that you have to comply with.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think maybe I'll just start off the conversation and then you can all join in. I've given quite a bit of thought to this, and most of you recognize that I'm pretty much in favor of private property rights. I feel that this is one of those private property rights that should be protected, but of course, with all private property rights, we have our rights as long as we do not harm our neighbors. And therefore, my opinion is that the use of any particular property for short-term rental is just fine as long as nothing happens there that wouldn't be permitted if a single-family usage were taking place. I do have some concerns about, for instance, insurance. There is a big issue with insurance. Insurance companies set different criteria for owner-occupied properties and rental properties, and I would want to be certain that people have the proper insurance coverage, because it's very different. I don't think we have a mechanism in our city to do that, and I guess we could probably have a registry. We could certainly do that. I'm also concerned that the safety conditions of the home be appropriate for use by individuals. For instance, proper doorways, trip hazards, fire alarms that might be inspected annually. I think we could set up a registry, perhaps through our inspection department, that basically said to the public, look, you're welcome to do this, but these are the things that would cause it to be in compliance, and that you need to have regular inspections of these things. You need to have insurance in place, just as we issue occupancy permits with construction. I think that we could issue these permits, not as a negative, we're trying to stop you from doing this, just in the way that we want you to do it in a safe way. I think that another thing that we need to make sure that we have is that I would think we'd want to have in our registry is complete and full registration records for those people who are staying at a place, and with their names, their addresses, their phone numbers, and how to reach them, and I don't know if they have a criminal record or whatever. I guess we could get real detailed, but I know that in reading the law, all we are allowed to do is to deal with the safety issues, if I'm correct, life safety issues. So that's what I have to say about it, and now we'll open it up for everyone else. We'll start down here with Mr. Simmons.
I have a question. Have we ever had any regulation whatsoever on like bed and breakfast? We've never had any.
I'm sorry, say that again. Any?
I said, have we had, Sebastian, any type of regulations pertaining to bed and breakfast, for example? Or,
Bed and breakfast?
Yeah, that's.
Yes, there are land development codes regulating bed and breakfasts. There are conditional uses in certain zoning districts.
What's kind of the difference between the short-term rentals and bed and breakfast?
I think, yeah.
Well, for one thing, oh, I'm so sorry. Bed and breakfasts are, again, conditional uses in approved zoning areas. And what the state law is stating is that a short-term vacation rental can be anywhere that a dwelling is. So it's allowed in single-family zoning, it's allowed in multifamily, it's allowed in the commercial area, wherever a dwelling may be. Whereas a bed and breakfast is more of a commercial establishment. But you're correct, it's the same type of operation where people come in for one night or, a few nights.
I could call my home a bed and breakfast and I'd be okay.
No, sir, you cannot, because you're not in that zoning. So you can do short-term rental, but what the state is saying is that you need to be registered, you should be registered and pay the applicable taxes for short-term rental. And in a bed and breakfast, it's really a commercial establishment. They provide meals.
There is a definitional difference, and if you'll give me a few minutes, I'll pull it up for you, okay?
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank staff and the city council for bringing this up again. And even though we're hitting against a wall here, I'm surprised that the hotel industry has not really gone up in arms with this, because it's really hurting their pockets. Again, I can go here all night. We just had a couple of experiences this week at my house across the street, and it's a party going on. I do like to have some kind of regulation whatsoever. I know it's hard because homeowners, this and that, and what have you, and it's everybody that comes in, you have to regulate them. Like you were suggesting, it's going to be kind of hard, but some kind of regulation needs to be in place as far as something. I mean, it's just because, can you imagine now, everybody, myself, I'll go ahead and buy a couple of houses and put them together and start renting them out in the whole block, and and that's what's going to happen sooner or later, because these people got a lot of money somewhere up north, and they're going to come down here and buy a house and just rent it the whole year. And $240 a night, add that up. I mean, it's not going to be the whole year, but there is going to be hopefully something that we can do to at least to curtail it a little bit, as far as not going to stop it, but I don't know. That's all I got to say.
Mr. Roth?
I'm going to try to be brief, but this whole matter has me very concerned with property rights and the property rights of the individual with the house or structure they own, but it will affect the property rights of their neighbor. And that's where I see a major issue popping up here, but again, it appears as though the state has taken away that type of control from us, that we as a plan commission, zoning commission, can't even come up with something to regulate that in some way with a permitting process or inspection process to govern them, to give relief to neighbors who are complaining. I'm worried about our code enforcement area, how they're going to handle this. And frankly, I don't know what the answer is. I read it over even after getting the brief late, because it apparently got lost in the mail somewhere. It's just very troubling to see this, and I don't have any answer, don't have any solution. I don't know what we can do. It just seems to me like we're kind of in a bad spot. We're going to take the brunt of the blame when things happen, or not we, but the city code enforcement area and the city as a whole. How do we stop it? Just kind of a rhetorical question. Anyone have any ideas?
Thank you.
I think it might be beneficial, too, to maybe come up with the different types of short-term vacation rentals there are, in that there could be the kind where I still live at my house, it's my domicile, it's my homesteaded property, but I rent out a room on a nightly basis, but I still live there. There are the ones then too, like you say, that are bought for a commercial purpose and the owner is out of area. So there are different kinds of the vacation rentals that maybe, not that we can put any regulations in place, but I don't know if that makes a difference on how the registry is formed or not.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Ms. Bosworth, but it really wouldn't make a difference in that manner, is the way I see it in reading through this regulation and doing the research. But what I would recommend, if this commission, it sounds like you're moving in that direction, that you'd like to do something. Now, again, we have what the Indian River County has done as far as the registry. And perhaps we can modify this and come up with a model for you all to consider. It will be difficult to monitor this 100%. Just be aware of that. I mean, you can ask everyone to register. It doesn't mean that 100% would register. However, if you live across the street from a single-family home that is blatantly being rented, short-term rental, then you would have the recourse, let's put it that way, to contact code enforcement, have code enforcement come out, hand the package to them, or contact the owner and make sure that they comply.
That's the type of answer I want to see, because
Okay.
that would give some relief, and knowing there is some type of ordinance regulation on the books, it would give people pause before they just went ahead and started it, saying, I can do it. If they know there's an ordinance in effect, they may change their mind and look at the process before they start it, and at least be more educated on what they can do and what they can't do. Saving the neighbor a bit.
I'm sorry, I agree, but going back to what Ms. Bosworth said, if I decide I'm going to Airbnb my one room in my house, that will not be captured and that will not be regulated. And I just want you to be aware that we may not be able to monitor or capture 100% of the short-term vacation rentals that go on in the city, but perhaps this would give us some type of regulatory control. I know that Ms. Bosworth and I have discussed revisiting our noise ordinances, and Dory, I'm sorry, for parking in residential areas, we don't really have a code for that, do we?
It's kind of a catch-22 for the vacation rentals, is that the park, when it was discussed at City Council, they decided not to put a limit on the amount of cars, because there were families that had teenagers that had the cars. And they came up with regulation that states that all cars cannot be parked in the front swale, and the cars have to be all registered and insured to people that live in the house. So that might not, the short-term vacation rentals is not going to be in compliance with that code if you have 5 or 6 cars. None of the cars are going to be registered to the owner of the house. Yeah, so that may have to be tweaked or at least adjusted.
And that is a good point, because I have a very large family, and when they come for Thanksgiving, I mean, everybody's parked all over the place. So I mean, that's something to consider. Thank you for bringing that up.
See, it is difficult to draw the line when you make up something there, where you end up there. So you come up with some draft, we will review that thing and see what we could do.
You know, there's another point also that if we had a good registry and encouraged the people who are doing this, and I know a number of people who are, that it really could be a benefit to those individuals to receive our certificate of compliance. It could go right in their ad that says, all safety measures of the city of Sebastian have been met. This home is regularly inspected for safety, and I think it could be a benefit both to the people who want to rent a home for short term and to the people who are renting them out. I spoke with a gentleman yesterday who decided he's going to go for the winter with his travel trailer, and he's going to visit the whole United States, and while he's gone, he has put his property on the short-term rental, and it is rented for every single night between now and the end of April. and he's earning about $5,000 a month while doing that. This is it's already all rented out. But this is where I think for a small fee or a reasonable fee, we could perhaps even set up an additional code enforcement person who goes to inspect the house and check the record books of who the registers are and make sure that the insurance is in place and that the fire things are in place. And it could be a benefit to all parties and cover the cost of it, and it would certainly help the neighbors. I think also, in our, and we have kind of a goofy parking ordinance. I was opposed to the way it was set up when it was engendered many years ago. I believe our parking ordinance says that the driveway, in order to park outside the driveway must be completely filled with cars. You can't just keep the driveway open so you can play badminton on the driveway. It's got to be filled. No parking places remaining in the driveway, and I don't think that, I don't think that gets
I
much
really like
attention.
the certification process. If there's some way we can work that into it, that would encourage people to participate more in it and allow them to put it in ads and be
I don't think we should not encourage the people to do that, go that way.
They're doing it anyway.
Well, that's true.
It's
But we
funny
also
because
have
all these,
a point of reference. If, say, a neighbor complains to somebody and they aren't part of that, now there's a mechanism in place. Well, hey, this is what has happened. You're not conforming to that. And we have something that's actually on the book, so to speak, where people will have to adhere to. But I like the idea of the registry with the qualifications. I think, Lisa, you were
There's a
talking
problem
about.
when you put insurance restriction. They're not gonna get insurance, why they should get, so.
Oh, they can get it. It just costs money.
Yeah.
that's the
You
whole
can
point,
get
it's
it.
gonna cost them more. They also have to register with the state of Florida, because my wife called the other day to see what was the scoop on it. They do have to register with the state of Florida, and some of them don't.
Most of them don't.
there's
Don't.
tax, too.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the whole point. It's funny because I heard not too long ago there was a situation where I think some guy had put a little camera into one of those Airbnbs. And it's funny because all this is going to come to a halt when all some of these stuff start coming out. That it's not, supposed to happen, and then all of a sudden you watch. Now it's a money-making machine, everybody, but good things don't last forever, do they?
They're gonna sell videos.
Well,
Yeah.
From my
Yeah, he
own
had cameras in the bedrooms.
From my own perspective, I have stayed in homes in other communities and found it quite a nice way to travel. I'm not the rowdy type, so we didn't cause any problems.
Really?
But it was really a very nice way to get a feeling for a community that you don't get in a hotel either. And that's kind of what we were looking for.
I think if we do have either discussion or draft registry, I would like to anyways bring in our building official, because as he has understood it, the houses themselves as a single-family dwelling have already received their certificate of occupancy, that they meet all the building codes and fire codes for a single-family dwelling. If we would create this registry and they are declaring their house to be a vacation rental, he said that there was some gray area in the building code if that trips it to a different use, an R3, I believe he kept throwing out, that because it was being used more as a short-term rental, it may require sprinkler systems. And that may be then, can be cost prohibitive to a
There you go.
homeowner.
There you go,
Which may in turn not have them register them, because now they're having to go through this extra expense. So there's a catch-22 with the registry on if we're going to make it prohibitive for them to, or not want to register.
But
But
let
he
me-
had some very good info, and I think we should have Mr. Esseltine comment as part of the discussion.
Doesn't hurt to do it.
Can I interject? It's very easy to find them. Just go on the internet and you'll see all the addresses. They're all there.
And that
you
was
can
part of
just-
the code enforcement part of creating a registry on who would enforce you getting onto the
Because
registry.
that's another thing. You have more people there. You know, it's not a regular dwelling. You have, like the other day, 9 people in a house. Well, there's safety concerns there besides, you know, cooking, a lot of things. I mean, it's just not, I don't know.
I really think that it behooves us to figure out, if at all possible, how to encourage people who they're going to do this regardless. I think we need to encourage them in instead of shoving them out, outside the law, inside the law, inside the safety concerns. Not make it such that a large number of people will wish to do this in secret, but rather in public and in good, safe surroundings. And absolutely, the insurance thing is really important.
And the prohibition of commercial events at, you know, hiring somebody to come to perform at a B&B when there's 20 people there.
In the backyard?
Yeah,
Yes.
and not only that, now that you mentioned, Angel, we're using this as a commercial venue, these houses. You turn them into a commercial. Is this supposed to be residential or commercial? That's another thing.
Well, it would have to be designed.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but you're using this as a
prohibits.
commercial entity in a residential.
The state says we can't.
No, I know.
The only thing we can regulate is safety, life safety issues.
Well, it says the local law cannot prohibit vacation rentals or regulate the duration or frequency of rental of vacation rentals. There's been some attorney general opinions that have kind of gone a little bit further, that there's not a ton of case law, but some attorney general opinions that have gone a little bit further that have indicated you can't regulate the spacing or limit the number in a neighborhood and things like that. And it is implied in this opinion that it is in residential neighborhoods, zoned residential neighborhoods. So I wouldn't say we can't do anything, right? But we can't do what one would logically probably want to do, is either, well, I don't get the feeling you all want to prohibit it, but you know, require a minimum stay, or again, require that they be spread out a certain way, or be in a certain, I don't think we can say that they can't be in the residential zoning district. And so, because it is residential, it is just transient residential. And if you don't mind me switching gears a little bit, if I can answer Mr. Simmons' question. The definition of a vacation rental is any unit or group of units in a condominium, cooperative, or individually or collectively owned single-family, two-family, three-family, or four-family house or dwelling unit that is also a transient public lodging establishment, but that is not a timeshare project. And then the definition of a bed and breakfast inn is a bed and breakfast inn is a family home structure with no more than 15 sleeping rooms, which has been modified to serve as a transient public lodging establishment, which provides the accommodation and meal services generally offered at a bed and breakfast inn. Lovely circular definition there. And which is recognized as a bed and breakfast inn in the community, and which is situated or by the hospitality industry. I think it's really scale and number there is the difference. And finally, I don't like to interrupt your discussions, and I don't want to. The parking, the land development codes, parking regulation regarding parking in the shoulder and swales, and Ms. Bosworth is correct, you have to kind of fill up your driveway before it's allowable. But it's a little bit problematic when I kind of went to read it earlier today. There's an exception. A vehicle may park on the shoulder if one of the following conditions exists. Motor vehicle has been removed from the paved street due to mechanical failure, or is temporarily parked due to emergency situations such as an accident. And then the second one says, the motor vehicle is titled to the owner or resident of the residential lot adjacent to the right-of-way, or an invited guest thereof. and all available parking space within the driveway of said lot is occupied by other motor vehicles. I mean, generally speaking, when you have a renter, that is typically legally considered an invitee or a licensee. And so if you want to look at if parking is a concern, we may want to look at the wording of that a little bit more closely.
That was my point when they initiated this years ago, is that I don't think it's very enforceable. Other comments? This was a good discussion. Can we just call what we're doing a consensus, or do we need to do a recommendation?
We have this under staff matters, so just a direction to staff on how you would like to proceed.
Why don't we have staff prepare something for us to review based on discussion tonight and their best interpretation of that? Or is that too big and unwieldy of a task?
Not at all, sir. We can address your concerns, and quite frankly, we'll probably be using the Indian River County registration application as the boilerplate, if you will. And also be aware that I believe this issue will be coming up in the legislation this spring. They open up in January now. So I believe it will be brought forward again for discussion by the legislation. So maybe things will change. We don't know.
I haven't had the opportunity to read the Indian River County thing, so I'd like a copy of that. But I'd also, if you could, include in, and I would like to see that people who are coming from outside of the community and may be renting these, I think, need to know a little bit about what this community requires of a residence, like our noise ordinance. I think that should be posted for the guest. I think they also need to know that we have septic systems, and they don't work exactly the way things work in the city, and you could end up with a very uncomfortable weekend if you don't operate them properly. And there should be a list of emergency numbers. That's, again, this is a safety issue. It should be posted. If you're going to have guests staying in your house, that you need to have this information.
It's right, it's totally different than being in a hotel.
Absolutely.
Because you're on your own and you're in a different city.
When
Definitely.
On one of the experiences that I had staying in a place like this, we did have an emergency, and we could not reach the owner of the property. He had said he would be away for the weekend and unreachable, and we should call his son. Well, his son wasn't answering his phone. And we really didn't know who else to call. But, so I just, you might add that as well if it's not there.
Well, and in this registration, at least this example one, and actually I don't recall if I read this in Indian River County or someplace else, it is in the registry, they require that there be a local contact, whether it's a property manager or the owner that lives somewhere else and this is their second home or something of that nature, but they require that there be a local contact. So whether they answer their phone or not, we can't regulate that, but at least they have the contact.
Commission, I will email the Indian River County ordinance to you so you can see what they have in place, out to the whole commission, all commissioners.
I'm looking forward to see what you bring forth.
Do we need to set a time frame on it, or just as completed? I don't know, what
Could
is
you
your
have that by
recommendation?
Tuesday, please?
Sure, absolutely. Well, because of the holidays, I want to say
Well,
that
yeah.
we will attempt to get you something by the last meeting in January, but it may be more the first meeting in February, if that's okay with this
Perfectly
commission.
acceptable to me,
That'll be fine.
yeah.
Thank you.
As long as nothing is looming on the horizon that you hear of that's coming to council, because they usually, push things to us to take a look at. So if you hear of something being here in City Hall, it's looming, coming up to the council, tip us off.
Okay, sir.
Can I just, again, just for clarification for my own purposes, because I'll probably have to research this, what exactly was your issue or your concern, or what were you looking for with respect to insurance, Ms. Kautenberg?
it would be my concern, if I were ruling the world, that these residences are properly insured for for instance, when you rent a house out, you carry a different kind of insurance than when you are the owner occupant.
Yeah, renter's insurance.
Well,
It's
you don't actually have to have insurance by law
No, but I
on
think
real property.
No, you don't. But
Okay.
I think that I think that's one of the things that is a safety concern
Okay.
for us, and that we could require that insurance be carried to cover
Okay.
the liability or of short-term rental occupants. And I know that the insurance industry has such a thing.
Is there a particular liability you're looking at? And again, I know I'm going to have to research this, so I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm trying to just get an idea and direction.
Or tripping and falling and scalding yourself in the shower and all that kind of stuff that could happen to any individual. I mean, my goodness, people have brought suits for coffee that was too hot at McDonald's. I don't think we want to be super restrictive, but I would be concerned that the people who stay there are staying in a place that is properly insured for their safety.
But the neighbor's concern is the noise and traffic situation, that's most important there. Noise is the most important for the neighbors, yeah.
I think where Ms. Fraser was going was, somewhere it is here. Oh, it's on the second page of this short-term vacation rental brief. The second point up from the bottom, life safety and building codes may include. That's, I think, what you were alluding to, some of the things we can look at. And that's a good guideline there, because some things in there I didn't think we could, but I know we can't get heavy-handed, but at least we can cover it. And a reference to the DBPR, how they're involved in this, I didn't quite understand that. For certification, they're being asked to register with the DBPR, the state organization?
Yeah, that is current law. Yeah,
What's the
the
law?
statute requires that anyone offering a transient rental, which includes single-family dwellings, short-term vacation rentals, must register with DBPR as a person offering a transient short-term
Yeah,
vacation
so that
rental.
way they start taxing them, I guess, because they're going to be collecting, I guess.
And I mean, again, you can actually search to see if a particular owner is on that list. And you can, just as you can report, unlicensed professionals and things like that, you can report
Exactly.
that to DBPR as well, if your concern is that. So, but that is current law, current
They have
state
to
law.
register, yes.
That's what, Department of Business and
Business and professional regulation.
DPBR. They have to register.
They're on a speed dial on my computer.
I mean, they also require registration of hotels, bed and breakfasts, your traditional short-term rental units as well, or transient rental units. But they changed the law, I believe in 2011, but don't quote me on that, but that for dwelling transient rentals as well as for condominium transient rentals, the offeree, the owner, has to register with DBPR.
Thank you.
Needs to have some kind of control.
Yep.
Some.
This is the section of our agenda that asks for public input. If there is anybody here from the public who would like to address the commission, this is your opportunity. Nobody.
We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, no public input. Any new business? No? Okay. Commissioners' matters.
Yes, at the Chester Gap where the new dollar store is going, they have a temporary construction sign almost 10 feet tall. So what is the requirement for that?
I can double check on it. I know that you have to have at least some sort of permit issued for you, which they have had the tank removal to be able to put that up. I did notice it was kind of high too. I believe the size is okay. I will double check if it is 10
It is
feet.
very tall.
Yes.
We want everybody to know, right?
Which 10 feet is the maximum site height. It is
Might
height
be a
of the
little bit,
sign.
yeah, 10 to-
And it is considered a temporary sign that did
Yeah.
need a permit, so I don't know how much regulation we can on that.
I have a question, I'm not sure if the staff can answer it. What's taking so long to finish County Road 512? There's never anybody out there working, and that road should have been finished months ago. So I just want to know if there's an answer to that.
Excuse of rain, weather.
I do have some information in that. It was published someplace, I believe. It was supposed to be finished the middle of December because of the rain, et cetera. It's now been pushed back to the middle of January.
I believe you, but there's been
that's
a
what
lot of
was-
days when it
that was
wasn't raining,
published.
and there's just nobody out
It's
there
amazing.
working, so.
I believe we'd have to get an answer from the county.
I'd like to make a comment as far as the young people showing up here tonight to observe our meeting. I want to thank you all for coming. I don't know if it's instructional or not, or if you learned anything, but this is your city at work, and all the different committees and the volunteers that sit up here, whatever, but maybe one day you'll be up here as well. So thanks for coming.
I would like to, second that, but also I want to bring up a situation I've asked on it a couple of times, but I don't know what the status is right now, and that's the pedestrian sidewalk on Barber Street at the railroad crossing. There's no gate, there's no sidewalk. People are forced to walk on the street all times of day in darkness. And with a huge residential area on the west side of the railroad tracks and a pharmacy and major grocery store and other convenience stores on the east side, it's a problem. And I just want to bring it back up to the surface and see if we can't get some movement. I know that our previous city engineer was waiting on All Aboard Florida, but that wait can go on forever. And I know the railroads are really tough to work with, really tough, but we got to do something to get it going. There's two residents that I know of in Park Place that walk to either Walgreens or Publix across the tracks. And again, I've seen it happen a number of times where people are walking and it's dark. It's really dark. And of course, they're not wearing light clothes. So that compounds the problem. But I just want to bring it back up to the surface and see where we need to push a button or something. I don't want to do anything to upset the city. I know that there are priorities that we have to make, but I really would like to see something going on that. If need be, I'll send a formal request to the city manager.
Are you talking about a street light or something?
sidewalk.
Just a
Sidewalk, and if that goes in, then I'm sure the railroad's going to want a gate, pedestrian gate, and it might necessitate two other gates for traffic as well, because now when they work on the tracks, one will come down and cars zigzag around it. So it is an extensive project, I understand that, but gosh, if we don't start somewhere, and I've been talking about this for 3 years now, nothing's happened.
I think I have a foggy, distant memory of an issue with the railroad owning land, and we can't put a sidewalk on their land without
That's correct.
their,
Well, we need to work with them, and nothing's been done to get to the railroad.
We also had a project in that area that that engineer, it was going to be an off-site improvement for that project. It was going to be the senior housing. And I know they were going to work to try and get it. And when that project pulled out, there hasn't been any activity on it, Mr. Roth. I can agree with that.
So would a couple of streetlights help? I mean, that wouldn't solve the problem particularly, but would that be of any help?
No, you did sidewalk.
We'll,
It's very dangerous. The road is too narrow for anybody to be
Yeah,
walking on the
there's no
road.
sidewalk.
we will investigate as to where that landed. Dory may be correct that once the development pulled out, it kind of got shelved. But we'll look into that. I was successful in putting in a railroad crossing and sidewalks and an individual gate for New Smyrna Beach on Mary Street years ago now, but I do recall that the railroad made the city pay for everything. So just be prepared, but there may be some safety things that we might be able to do in the interim.
I think also too, it was part of, I know what Mr. Watanabe was working on is to get the quiet zones, and we had applied for those grants for the All Aboard Florida. So I don't know if we were waiting for that to be a part of the improvement of our improvements to the intersections. And then with all the lawsuits and being held up in this north part, I don't know too. We'll definitely pull files and see what we can find.
You're absolutely correct, Dory. That was the criteria that he was following with regard to that. And of course, that would save the city money, but you can't seem to get answers from All Aboard Florida, or at least he told me that he couldn't, to know where they were at. And with the animosity that was shown to All Aboard Florida from both Indian River and Martin counties, we kind of, angered them a bit, so now they don't want to help us in any way, shape, or form, to the little thing of even giving information on when they're going to be doing anything here to allow us to plan. So I know it's tough, but anyways, we're talking about it. I feel better. We brought it back up to the surface, so hopefully we can get something going somehow. Thank you.
Mr. Alvarez?
No, but
Mr. Simmons, anything for the good of the
No.
order? No? Okay. All right. Attorney matters?
I have no report, thank you.
Okay. Staff matters? Anything that we want specifically to be on our next agenda? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.